The sixth verse of Psalm 27. V'ata yarum roshi al oivai svivotai, ve'ezbecha v'ahalo zivche trua, ashira v'azamra l'Adonai. Now is my head high over my enemies round about. I sacrifice in his tent with shouts of joy, singing and chanting a hymn to the Lord. It seems that every school has at least one, the kid who is completely rejected, ostracized, bullied. At my elementary school in the late 80s, it was a boy in my grade, Jacob. He had been new to our school halfway through 4th grade, but even by the beginning of the next school year, he still didn't have a single friend. It might have been his glasses, large, brown, and really not cool. It could have been that he came from a rough home. I'm pretty sure, looking back, that he was not only bullied in the schoolyard, but also by his father. It could have been that his clothing was often either too big or too small. Clearly, he was getting hand-me-downs, and even during the short period of time when an item fit properly, it was usually out of style or worn out. He was quiet and kind of goofy. When kids said mean things to him or tripped him in the hallway, he would silently look down, avoiding their eyes. He never fought back, and I never saw him cry. Lunch recess was the worst, because from what I remember, there really were no adults around. I think the lunch ladies were supposed to keep an eye out, but they usually sat at a picnic table on one end of the very large schoolyard and only intervened if someone was bleeding or crying. The usual scenario was that a group of boys would chase him to the place we all called the bridge, a large wooden play structure with 2 towers connected by a bridge, which was several feet off the ground. Jacob would be chased there with the boys coming at him from both towers, trapping him, yelling, "Walk the plank! Walk the plank!" His only escape was to climb onto the railing, stand up and jump off, several feet down onto the ground. He usually fell to his hands and knees as he landed, and sometimes would emerge with wood chips all over his clothing, in his hair, and stuck to his face. I am sure this was terrifying. It was an almost daily occurrence. In the fall of our 5th grade year, we had a trip to a nature center for a week-long overnight school camp. I was delighted to go, but my best friend Anna was vulnerable to homesickness, so she decided to stay at school with a substitute teacher and an empty classroom, save, you guessed it, Jacob. I don't know why Jacob did not go with us that week. I can speculate that perhaps his parents couldn't afford camp, or that the teachers were aware of the constant bullying and thought it best to not take it on the road. Whatever the reason, while the rest of us were at the nature center hiking through the woods, dissecting owl pellets, and learning the reason that wintergreen lifesavers spark when you eat them in the dark, Jacob and Anna were back at school, slowly marking time through a boring, miserable week. Or so I thought. The next Monday, I asked Anna how it had been to have to be alone with Jacob that whole time. "Oh," she said, "you know, he's actually a really nice kid. We had a good time." At lunch that day, we sat at our normal table with a group of girls. Suddenly, Anna stood up and waved across the room, and I watched as Jacob hesitantly made his way over to us, his thick glasses sliding down his nose. He took a seat next to Anna, and she discreetly pulled out a paper bag and put it in front of him. Then she leaned over to me and whispered, "You know, he never has lunch. I didn't ever notice before last week. So I started bringing one for him. My mom doesn't mind." The other girls at the table looked curiously at Jacob, then Anna, and then they all went back to their conversation. When the bell rang for lunch recess, we went outside as usual. Jacob stayed close to us, and I thought he seemed nervous, looking around, as if waiting for something. That was when it occurred to me. Anna had the same look of realization on her face. We knew what was going to happen, and once it began, there wouldn't be much we could do to stop it. "I have an idea," she told us, shifting course and leading the way to the bridge. She turned to Jacob and instructed him. "Look, you have to beat them there. Get up on top. You need to own the place. Don't let them chase you there. You get up there and show them that you aren't afraid." As we climbed onto the structure, several boys began to run toward us, expecting the usual scenario and what they considered to be a good time. "Jacob, get on the bridge. Do it, now. Get on there and don't move," Anna instructed him. Then she took her place on one tower, and I took mine on the other. Jacob was in the middle, flanked by Anna and me, hands on our hips, waiting for someone to try to climb up. Most of the boys saw what we had done and just stopped watching, curious for what might happen next. But one of them, Eric, was not so easily deterred. He began to climb the ladder up the tower where Anna was. She waited until his hand gripped the top rung, and then stepped hard on his fingers. Eric jerked his hand back in surprise and pain. "You try anything and I'll do that again," Anna told him. "Hey, everyone," she continued. "Jacob is our friend, and if any of you chase him ever again, you'll have to deal with us too." I watched the boys down below. They peered up at us, then looked at each other, shrugging. My heart was pounding into my ears, and when I looked at Jacob, I could see that he was still afraid. But then suddenly the boys turned and walked away, then began running, chasing a ball down the hill to the soccer field. "See, I told you," Anna said. I looked at her and she continued. "I told him all he needed was one friend who would refuse to leave him alone with those mean kids. And now he has 2 friends. I don't think they'll do that again. It's no fun to them anymore. And if they do, well, we're here." Jacob stood for a second, then dropped down to his knees. I had never seen him cry before, but now it was as if every emotion of fear, rejection, hurt, pain, loneliness, all of it poured out of him loudly. I kept praying that God would make it all stop. I prayed every night. I prayed and prayed. His words were overcome again by sobs. Anna and I sat down next to him, right there on the bridge, and said nothing, as he continued to release all of the emotions pent up inside of him since coming to our school, since maybe before that. The sobbing turned to anger, and then suddenly he started laughing. Did you see them? Did you see their faces? Did you see Eric when you stepped on his hand? It's over, isn't it? It's really over. He stood up and looked down and around the schoolyard from the high point of the bridge. It's over.
Yarum roshi, 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 yarum roshi.
A Song of Jacob. At night, alone in my bed, I called upon you, Lord. I dreaded the next day and needed your help. And you answered. You delivered me from my enemies to the highest place, and surrounded me with friends. You sent them to remind me that I am a person of worth. I am a person created by you, who deserves decency and kindness and friendship. I was delivered from those who delighted in my fear and pain. They scattered, and then my body was overcome with sadness, anger, relief. In these emotions, I cried, I yelled, and I laughed. I know that my life will not always be perfect. I know that they may try to come for me again. But in all of this, you raised me to the high place. You gave me allies, and I no longer stand